Hey guys, it's Tori from Hats Tutors, and today we're going to be learning complex substituents and more importantly, how to name cycloalkanes. So complex substituents. So not all the substituents in organic chemistry are going to be a simple side chain. So using the line structure we learned before, not everything is going to be like this. And as you can see here, this is something called isopropyl. So instead of it just being like a chain like that, aside from the main chain, it could be something more complicated, such as this. And you're like, how do you name this? Well, this is called isopropyl, but this is the common name. There's a more systematic way with the IUPAC naming system, which is the standard naming system. So this is just a list of some of the more common complex substituents with their IUPAC names, as you can see here. And there's also some of these other names, which are sometimes also used, and you might see your teachers using them as well. So how these IUPAC names work, it's kind of basically the same as naming this thing, but as an individual, like a structure with a simple side chain. So as you can see here, if we draw isopropyl, it would be this. And it would be connected from here to the main chain. So let's just draw a simple main chain here. Sorry, this is a bit messy, but it doesn't really matter. So because we're focusing on the isopropyl here. So as you can see, the isopropyl, there are two carbons here, and there's one, a set of a methyl sticking out. So that's why it's called ethyl methyl. It's the same case for sec-butyl, tert-butyl, isobutyl. But I don't know if I need to go more in depth into this because it's the same naming concept as the isopropyl that I just showed. So degrees of the carbon. So this is important because the degrees of the carbon actually explains why this is called a sec-butyl, tert-butyl, etc. So there are 4 degrees of carbon. There's a primary carbon, a secondary carbon, a tertiary carbon, and a quaternary carbon. The degrees of carbon are determined by the amount of carbon they are connected to. So a first degree carbon or a primary carbon, interchange such as this, would only be connected to another carbon. We know that this is a carbon, this point's a carbon, this point's a carbon, and this point's a carbon. So a carbon that would only be connected to one other carbon would be this carbon and this carbon. So both of these would be primary. On the other hand, these other two, they're connected to two carbons. So they would be called a secondary carbon. And these carbons are important later on. But they also explain why this is called a sec-butyl, tert-butyl. As you can see here, this carbon is connected to 3 other carbons, which is why it's called tertiary. And this carbon is connected to 2 other carbons. And of course you could say here, well Tori, it's also connected to the main chain, isn't it? Wouldn't that be 4 carbons? Well, you always disregard the main chain in this case, so that's why it's called the tert, and this is called the sec. Otherwise, if you include the main chain, this would be a tertiary carbon, and this would be a quaternary carbon. So cycloalkanes. So they have the formula of CnH2n. I'll give you a clue. This is not the last time we're going to see this formula. Something called alkene will also have the same formula. So then, cycloalkanes are alkanes that are folded into a ring shape. If you took biology, they can be usually found in steroids, such as testosterone, estrogen. As you can see here, these ring shapes, these are called cycloalkanes. Of course, these things have also different things that we call functional groups, which we will learn later on. But the basis is that these are cycloalkanes. So how do you name these cycloalkanes? So similar to the alkanes, instead of finding the longest chain, now you find the longest ring. And you name that as the parent. The parent just means the thing you put at the end. If the cycloalkane has any substituents, you want to name the groups such as the lowest carbon number possible is assigned to the groups alphabetically. Pretty similar to the naming alkanes. And you'll find out if you get the basics down, most of the organic naming is actually all the same. So let's just take a look at this example. In this case, we have a 6 ring. And in this case, this would be a hexane. But since it's a cycloalkane in a ring, we would add the prefix cyclo before it, so it would be a cyclohexane. And now we have 2 substituents. We have this group over here, which is an ethyl, and this group over here, which is a methyl. And we want to prioritize them by alphabetical order, so we want to name this as 1. But which direction do we go now? Do we go this direction or this direction? Well, since we want to minimize the number on the methyl, we would go from this direction, since this would become carbon number 3. And if we went from this direction, it would be carbon number 4. So, as you can see here, the final name would be 1-ethyl, 3-methyl, cyclohexane. So let's name the following. As you can see here, we have 4 carbons in a ring. So this would be called a it would be called a cyclobutane. And since we have an extra methyl sticking out, and we always label this as 1, it would be 1-methyl. My apologies for the bad writing. Cyclobutane. Let's just write it again. 1-methyl cyclobutane. And in this case, you could generally omit the 1 since it's not too necessary, so you can omit this. But you could keep it, it doesn't really matter. And now let's take a look at this case. So this would be a cyclopentane, so the parent would be the cyclopentane. And we have 2 chains here. We have this chain with 5 carbons and this chain with 1 carbon. So this would be called a pentyl, and this would be called a methyl. Since we number this alphabetically, methyl would be the number 1 then, and pentyl would be number 2. So it would be 1-methyl, 2-pentyl, cyclopentane. Sorry for the bad writing again. So now let's move on to drawing. So let's draw the following 1, 2, 3, 4 tetramethyl cyclohexane. Similar to drawing the original, similar to drawing alkanes, you want to start with the parent, the cyclohexane. So let's draw the cyclohexane first. It would just be a hexagon. I did a bad job here, sorry. Here. Cyclohexane. And now is 4 methyls attached to it. Tetramethyl. 1, 2, 3, 4 as well. So since they're number 1, 2, 3, 4, you know that they would be right beside each other. So it would be like this, 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 this. But of course, it doesn't really matter actually, because it can also be, sorry for the bad drawing, it can also be tetramethyl if it's like this, as long as these 4 methyls are beside each other. I hope all of you learned something, and I hope you guys have a great summer. Thank you for watching.